Black girl went to school and vanished. 24 years later dad finds this in house. Part 1, The Last Morning. The rain was light but steady on the morning of September 9, 1999, the kind of drizzle that left beads of water on windows but never demanded an umbrella. In the small town of Elmridge, Louisiana, the trees were still damp from a long night of storms. The cicadas had gone quiet, the air held a thickness, and the morning smelled of wet soil and something faintly metallic. Fiona Harper, 12 years old and barely 5 feet tall, pressed her face to the front window of the modest one-story home she shared with her father and grandmother. Her backpack sat by the door, pink with glitter that had begun to wear thin near the seams. She had styled her own hair that morning, a proud mass of tight curls wrapped into 2 puffballs and held in place by purple elastics. Her father, Daniel Harper, called her name from the kitchen. "Yo, Fee, come eat. You got time before the bus." "I'm not hungry," she called back, her voice distant. She lied. She was always hungry. But something had been off since the weekend. The dreams had returned, the kind where she was walking through the school hallway but nobody could see her. Where her feet didn't quite touch the floor. Where someone called her name but never showed their face. Daniel walked into the front room, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "Did you finish your science project?" he asked. Fiona nodded. "Fee, did you really finish it?" "I did," she replied. But she didn't look at him. He studied her carefully. Fiona was a quiet kid, bright, curious, with an old soul. She always read the paper before he could get to it and corrected his grammar. But today she seemed smaller. Shrunken somehow. Daniel crouched beside her. "You okay?" Fiona's eyes met his. She hesitated. "I saw someone," she whispered. "Where?" "In my room." He stood up slowly, tension crawling across his back. "Last night?" She nodded. Daniel said nothing. Just walked to her room, checked every inch. Window was locked. Closet empty. No sign of anything. But the way she'd said it, not afraid, not excited. Just resigned. At 7:21 a.m., the school bus pulled up at the end of Pine Street. Fiona slipped on her backpack, kissed her father on the cheek, and walked out the door. He watched her go, the 2 big jeans, the lopsided stride, the way she looked back 3 times before turning the corner. That was the last time Daniel Harper ever saw his daughter. The police report. It took 20 minutes before someone noticed Fiona hadn't arrived at Elmridge Middle School. She wasn't marked absent until after first period. Her homeroom teacher, Mrs. Calloway, assumed she was sick. It wasn't unusual, flu season had started early that year. It wasn't until 1:45 p.m., when Daniel got off his shift at the docks, that anyone understood she was truly missing. He returned home to find Fiona's backpack still missing, her lunch untouched in the fridge, and 3 messages on the answering machine. The last was from the school secretary. "Mr. Harper, this is Ms. Annabelle at Elmridge Middle. Just checking if everything is okay with Fiona. We didn't get a call this morning and wanted to confirm she's homesick." Daniel froze. His stomach turned to stone. He drove straight to the school. Her teachers hadn't seen her. None of her classmates had either. A boy named Marcus said he thought he saw her near the back fence before homeroom, but he couldn't be sure. He had a tendency to lie. At 4:06 p.m., Daniel called the Elmridge Police Department. The responding officer, Detective Lena Rivas, took the call seriously, not something Daniel expected in a town where missing often meant ran away. But Lena was new to the area. Transferred from Baton Rouge after her second divorce. She had the face of someone who had seen too much, and the voice of someone who didn't want to see any more. She arrived at the Harper house at 4:42 p.m. Fiona had been missing nearly 10 hours. Daniel showed her Fiona's room. Neat. Almost too neat. Bed made. Homework stacked. No sign of struggle. She said she saw someone, Daniel muttered. When? Last night. Said he was in her room. Lena paused, wrote something down. Did she describe him? No. Just said she saw someone. The officer walked the perimeter of the house. No signs of forced entry. The backyard fence was old, and parts had fallen in. Any stranger could have walked in without being noticed. Daniel followed her around. She's not the type to run, he said. They never are, Lena replied. At least, that's what people think. She was honest, almost too much so. But Daniel appreciated that. What he didn't know, what Lena didn't say out loud, was that she had seen too many cases like this. Black girls went missing all the time, and after a week or two, the flyers came down. The hope dried up. The world moved on. But something about Fiona Harper didn't sit right. She didn't match the usual pattern. There were no angry diary entries, no secret boyfriend, no rebellious phase. She'd been researching a project on wetlands. She had borrowed a library book on Louisiana ghosts and legends. She was reading about something called the Man in the Pine Coat. When Lena flipped through the notebook on Fiona's desk, she found a page ripped out. A single torn edge, frayed and rough. What was on this page? She asked. Daniel shook his head. I don't know. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat in Fiona's bed with her backpack clutched to his chest, listening to the sound of the cicadas outside. Something rattled in the wall, an old house, always creaking, but he swore he heard a whisper. Just once. His name. Forgotten case. The days turned to weeks. The flyers faded in the sun. The local news moved on. The case file grew fat with interviews, blind leads, and maps drawn in pencil. Detective Rivas followed every hint, sightings at gas stations, rumors of a van near the school, a drifter arrested in Mississippi who might have said something. All dead ends. Daniel changed. His beard grew out, patchy and uneven. He stopped going to work. People whispered. They said grief had hollowed him out. By the third month, even Rivas started to doubt herself. Fiona's room remained untouched. Daniel couldn't bear to move her shoes from the hallway. Sometimes, at night, he would leave the door open just in case she walked back in. By 2001, the case had gone cold. Part 4, The House, 24 years later. The house on Pine Street hadn't changed much, though time had given it a quiet rot. Shingles had begun to curl. The screen door no longer closed all the way. The air inside smelled of books, dust, and old grief. Daniel Harper still lived there, alone now. His mother had passed in 2011, quietly in her sleep. Her room had been sealed since. On the evening of May 17, 2023, something strange happened. Daniel had fallen asleep on the couch watching an old VHS tape of Fiona's school play. Her voice was high, clear, singing a line from Annie. When he woke up, it was dark. The TV screen was static. The time on the wall clock was frozen at 3:15. He got up, stretched, and heard something. A soft clunk. Inside the wall. It wasn't the first time. The house was full of sounds, sure, but this one was different. It wasn't wood settling. It was like an object. Something shifting. He followed it. Past the hallway. Into Fiona's room. The air was colder here. Always had been. He flicked on the light. Nothing seemed out of place, until he noticed the far corner. A section of the floorboard, slightly raised. He knelt. Ran his hand over it. Loose. He pried it open, expecting dust, maybe a mouse nest. But there was something hidden in the dark cavity beneath the floor. wrapped in old cloth. He pulled it out. A composition notebook, cracked, the black and white cover faded almost to gray. Taped shut. His heart kicked like a hammer. He recognized the tape, it was Fiona's. The glittery kind she used to decorate her school binders. Hands trembling, Daniel peeled it away. Inside the first page, in Fiona's unmistakable handwriting, were the words. "If you find this, I'm probably gone. But he doesn't know I saw him." Not really. Daniel sat back, stunned. The notebook was full. Pages and pages of Fiona's writing, some neat, some frantic. But it wasn't a diary. It was something else. Maps. Symbols. Notes. Lists of names. Descriptions of dreams. And always the same phrase, repeated at the bottom of each page. Pine Man watches. Pine Man remembers. The notebook. Daniel Harper sat in his daughter's childhood room, the lamp casting a weak yellow light against the walls. Outside, the wind stirred the pine trees with a sound like whispers. The notebook lay open across his knees. He turned the first page. October 3, 1999. I see him again in my dream. I'm walking home after the bus drops me off, but the road keeps getting longer. There's no sky, just trees. Tall, crooked trees like fingers. He's standing under the old bridge. He wears a long coat made of something like pine needles, stitched together. No face. Just something like a hole, and inside it, wind, or whispering. I woke up and my pillow was wet like I'd been crying. Grandma says I'm just growing. But I know it's not just a dream. Daniel read it 3 times. He turned the next page. This one was filled with symbols, loops, spirals, arrows, and crude drawings of trees. At the bottom. I think he's real. He flipped forward. October 10, 1999. He was near the school. I felt him before I saw him. I was in the hallway by the music room. It got cold. My pencil rolled off the desk. When I picked it up, I saw the shadow under the door. But no one else reacted. No one else felt it. What if I'm the only one who sees him? Daniel's hands trembled. He remembered the day she told him she saw someone. He hadn't believed her. Hadn't pushed her to explain. What if she had tried to tell him more, and stopped, because she knew he wouldn't listen? He turned another page. October 18, 1999. There's something under the school. I can hear it hum when I'm near the south wing stairs. Nobody ever goes down there anymore. Even Mr. Ellison says it's closed for repairs, but I don't think anyone's fixing anything. I think that's where he goes. That's where Pine Man lives. He eats time. I think that's why I feel like days are skipping. I miss whole hours sometimes. Whole conversations. I wrote something yesterday and it wasn't there today. There were pages missing. Not torn, just blank. Whole stretches of time where she wrote nothing. Then. November 1, 1999. He watches from inside people. I don't think he needs to walk. I think he can ride inside someone. I saw a teacher say something she never said. Her voice wasn't hers. And she looked right at me. Smiled. That's when I knew I had to hide this notebook. He's looking for it. He wants to erase it. I'm not crazy. Daniel stopped reading. The lamp flickered once, just a little buzz of the filament, but it was enough to raise the hairs on his arms. The room suddenly felt colder. He stood. Went to the window. Nothing but the dark yard, the sway of pines. But for a second, just before he turned back, he saw something. Or thought he did. A tall shape. Still. Near the tree line. Gone the moment he focused on it. Daniel closed the notebook. And for the first time in 24 years, he whispered his daughter's name out loud like a question. Fiona. Part 6, What the Walls Remember. The next morning, Daniel called the Elmridge Police Department. Detective Lena Rivas had long since retired, but the receptionist connected him with a cold case investigator, a man named Jason Weller. Young. Eager. When Weller arrived that afternoon, Daniel showed him the notebook. The detective flipped through the pages with a mixture of interest and doubt. "This is detailed," he said carefully. "You think she made it up?" Daniel asked. Weller paused. "I don't know. Kids imagine things. Especially when they're afraid." Daniel didn't reply. But when Weller stood to leave, he looked at the house one more time. "You ever had this place checked for crawlspaces?" he asked. "No." Weller tapped the wall in Fiona's room. Then again. A hollow sound. "Something back here," he muttered. "You got tools?" An hour later, they had removed part of the paneling behind Fiona's bookshelf. Behind it, a narrow space, no more than a foot wide, running the length of the room. At the end, almost hidden, was a wooden box. Weller pulled it out with gloved hands. Inside were 4 objects. A Polaroid photo, faded, of Fiona standing in front of the school, but there was something strange behind her in the photo. Something tall in the background. Blurred. A charm bracelet with one broken link. A strip of magnetic tape, labeled, "Listen at Night." And a yellowed slip of paper. Weller unfolded it. It read. "He comes through cracks. You can't patch what you can't see." Then, scribbled smaller underneath, in Fiona's handwriting. "Don't trust her. The one who asked about the janitor. Listen at night." The tape was no longer than 3 inches across. Black magnetic film, wound tightly inside a cracked plastic shell. On the label, written in childlike capital letters. "Listen at night. Only at night." Jason Weller took it with him when he left. He said he had access to playback equipment at the station. But something about his eyes, the way he kept looking back at the tree line before getting into his car, told Daniel he didn't want to listen to it alone. Neither did Daniel. That night, sleep didn't come. The notebook was still open on Fiona's bed. The page with the strange drawing, something like a staircase spiraling downward into darkness, seemed to pulse in the lamplight. He lay on the couch, eyes wide, heart racing. Then, at exactly 3:15 a.m., the TV turned on. No remote. No timer. Static on the screen. Just like the night before. Daniel sat up. For a moment, he heard it, under the hiss of the static, a voice. Not words. Just breath. And maybe a whisper. "Fiona." He turned the TV off. Pulled the cord from the wall. But even then, he swore the screen still flickered in the corner of his eye. Part 8, What the Tape Said. The next day, Weller called. His voice was low, tight. "Mr. Harper. I played the tape." Daniel waited. "There's nothing at first. Just hiss. Then, a voice. A girl's. Sounds like Fiona. But it's not a message. It's like a conversation. Like she's talking to someone." "What does she say?" "That's the thing," Weller said. "It's fragmented. Skipping. Bits cut out. But she keeps repeating something, he's inside the school. But he's not new. He's old. He's always been there." Daniel closed his eyes. Weller continued. "Then there's another voice. A man. Very faint. Almost like it's under hers. It just says one thing, over and over, she remembers. She remembers. She remembers." Is it her voice, really? I think it is. Silence stretched between them. Weller spoke again. There's a janitor mentioned in the file. Back then. 1999, Clyde Melvin. He quit the day after Fiona disappeared. Didn't show up to his shift. Left town. Never talked to police. Never gave an address. Daniel felt cold. You think she was talking about him? I don't know. But I ran his name. And guess what? What? There's no record of a Clyde Melvin working for the district. Not officially. Not in payroll. Not in the yearbooks. Nothing. Daniel blinked. But he was there. I remember him. So do 3 other teachers I talked to, Weller said. But it's like he was scrubbed. Part 9, Cracks in the Wall. Later that afternoon, Daniel went into Fiona's room again. He sat by the wall where the crawlspace had been uncovered. The air inside was still. Dry. He pressed his hand against the wood, just to feel it. Just to prove to himself it was real. And then he heard something. Not behind the wall, but inside it. A low clicking. Like teeth. He pulled his hand back. The wood had left a mark. Not a splinter, a shape. 5 small lines. Like fingers. He rushed out of the room, heart pounding, sweat beating down his back. He didn't sleep that night. At 3:15 a.m., he didn't wait for the TV. He just sat up and whispered, I know you're here. And for the first time, the house answered. A soft knock from the far room. Then another. Then the creak of a door he knew had been closed. Fiona's room. Part 10, The Man in the Photo. The next morning, Weller came back. He brought something with him, a scan of the Polaroid they had found. He had digitally enhanced the background. Daniel stared at it, lips parting slightly. Behind Fiona, just past the edge of the frame, something tall stood near the pines. Not a person. Not quite. The outline was too long. The limbs too stiff. The coat, if it was a coat, looked wrong. Like it was made of rough bark and woven moss. I sent it to an analyst, Weller said. He thought it was a trick of the light. But you don't think that, Daniel replied. No, Weller said. I don't. He sat down. There's something else, he said quietly. I went to the school. Daniel stiffened. They renovated in 2006. Tore out the south wing. But I talked to the current custodian. There's still a basement. Sealed now. Concrete poured over the stairs. Why? They said there were safety issues. Mold. Cracks in the structure. But here's the thing, when I walked through the halls, my phone started glitching. Screens flickered. Battery drained in minutes. He looked up. And I swear to God, Mr. Harper, I heard someone say my name. But I was alone. The second notebook. 2 days after Weller's visit, Daniel awoke to an odd smell, old paper, wax, and something faintly floral. He followed it. It led him not to Fiona's room, but to his mother's. The room had remained untouched since her passing. Dust blanketed the dresser. The curtains were yellowed with time. Her collection of ceramic angels still stood guard above the headboard. The scent was stronger now, lavender, the kind she used to place in satchels inside drawers. He opened the nightstand. Inside, under a bundle of faded church bulletins and crossword puzzle books, was a velvet pouch. And within it, a second notebook. Smaller. Leather-bound. Different from Fiona's old school book. But when Daniel opened it, he saw something that made his hands go cold. Inside the front cover. F.H. Fiona Harper. The handwriting was hers, but more mature. Less childlike. Dated, 2001 to 2003. Impossible. Fiona vanished in 1999. He flipped to the first page. January 8, 2001. They don't know I'm still here. The school changed. The halls shift. But the Pine Man can't see everything. I learned that. I found pockets. Quiet places. Thin walls. It doesn't smell like time anymore, not where I hide. He doesn't like chalk. Or bells. I use both. Daniel read, breath stuck in his throat. Page after page, written long after she vanished. Thoughts, maps, notes, patterns in the school. One passage stood out. February 14, 2001. I saw my dad. He was at the gate. He looked tired. Like he hadn't slept. I wanted to scream. But the glass was wrong. He couldn't hear. He walked away. And then it reset. Daniel dropped the book. Glass. She was behind glass? And then, his mind reeled, was that true? Had he gone to the school gate that day? Had he stood there, watching, unable to explain why? The memory surfaced like something drowning. Yes. Yes, he had gone that day. Why? He couldn't recall. Just that he had felt pulled there. And had left quickly, ashamed. Like something had been watching him. Part 12, The Sealed Stairs. Detective Weller had spent the last 48 hours submitting requests to the district board for access to the school's sublevel. All denied. Closed permanently due to asbestos, they claimed. Unsafe for public entry. But something didn't sit right. So he returned that night. After dark. Used a lockpick on the old utility door near the gymnasium. Behind it, dust and silence. He followed the faint blueprints he'd found in archived records. Past the boiler room. To a wall of smooth, gray concrete. No handle. No seam. But the air here felt different. He knocked once. Solid. Twice. Still. Then he crouched, and ran his hand along the floor. A hairline crack. And something else. A scent. Lavender. Just like the notebook. He placed his palm against the wall and closed his eyes. Then. A sound. Behind the concrete. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. Knock. 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 He backed away, heart hammering. Drew his flashlight, though the beam flickered. The lights overhead began to buzz. The building felt heavier now. As if something under the school had started to wake. And then. Whispers. Not outside. Inside his mind. Words without sound. Images not his own. A girl with no shadow. A hallway that turned when you looked away. A door that didn't lead out. And above all, trees. Pressed against the windows. Pressed against your eyes when you close them. Messages in the dust. That same night, Daniel returned to Fiona's room with both notebooks. He laid them side by side. The first, from 1999. The second, from 2001 to 2003. He began comparing drawings. The spiral. The tree with no branches. The eye inside the staircase. They appeared in both. One passage from the second notebook caught his eye. July 3, 2002. There are others. I'm not the only one. Some are deeper. Some forgot who they were. They whisper names. Some names I know. I heard mine once. But the voice wasn't mine. Daniel read the sentence over and over. Then he turned to the last page, the very end. The ink was smeared, as if written in haste. If he finds this, he'll know I remember. If I forget again, tell my father to knock 3 times. He'll know where. Under it, a shape. Not a tree. A house. His house. And on the side of it, scribbled like an afterthought, behind the mirror. Daniel stood, heart pounding. He went to the hallway. To the mirror that had hung there for 40 years, a simple antique with an ornate frame. He'd never removed it. He did now. Behind it, a flat, dust-covered panel of drywall. And in the center, a faint chalk marking. 3 vertical lines. 1 horizontal. And below them, a tiny hole. Like a keyhole. Or an eye. The knock. The house was silent. Midnight had come and gone. The mirror now leaned against the wall on the floor, and Daniel stood before the exposed panel. He stared at the chalk lines, 3 vertical, 1 horizontal. A memory tugged at the edge of his mind, an old game Fiona used to play. You knock 3 times, she had said once, tapping the kitchen table as a child, and then you listen. But only with your eyes closed. That's the rule. It had meant nothing to him then. Now, it chilled him. Daniel raised his hand. Knocked once. Then twice. Then a 3rd time. The sound echoed through the wall like it was hollow, deeper than it should be. And then, silence. He waited. Nothing. Just as he lowered his hand, came the answer. Knock. 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 His heart seized. Then. Scratch. Scratch, scratch. A soft dragging from the other side. Daniel staggered back. And then he heard it. A faint voice. Whisper thin. A girl's voice. Dad. He couldn't speak. Can you see it yet? The voice asked. Then, silence. He fell to his knees, breath shaking. The hole beneath the chalk marks, the tiny opening, seemed to pull light into it. He leaned close. Just for a second. And saw. A hallway. Stone. Wet. Lit by no source he could name. And far away, standing at the end of it. A figure. Back turned. Hair dark and long. Motionless. Part 15, The Envelope. Detective Weller returned to his apartment near dawn. He hadn't told anyone about the sealed sub-basement. He hadn't filed a report. He hadn't slept. When he stepped inside, he noticed it immediately. An envelope on the kitchen table. No stamp. No address. Just his name, handwritten. Inside, a single Polaroid. Black and white. A photo of a classroom. Desks in neat rows. The chalkboard had one word written on it. Again. But what froze Weller's blood wasn't the word. It was the kid in the corner of the image. Hunched over a notebook. He recognized the child. It was him. 8 years old. Same haircut. Same nervous fingers. Same shirt he'd worn for school pictures that year. But that couldn't be. He flipped the photo. On the back, a date. April 17, 1992. And one more line, written in pencil. You were there before. You just forgot. Part 16, The Repeating Name. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat by the mirror. Morning came slowly, gray and thick like fog. He held both of Fiona's notebooks in his lap. He began to notice something he hadn't before, a name. Over and over, hidden in the margins, in circles, in decorative swirls and corner doodles. Caleb. Sometimes. Caleb sees. Caleb doesn't forget. Caleb knocks when no one listens. He tried to recall if Fiona had known any Calebs. Nothing. He called Weller. I found a name, he said. It's all over her writing. Caleb? Weller said, voice low. Yes. Long silence. Then. Caleb Melvin. That was the janitor's full name. Clyde was a middle name. He went by it sometimes. But legally? Caleb. Daniel felt a chill crawl up his neck. She wrote about him, he whispered. Before and after she vanished. How? I don't know, Weller said. But I think we were both part of something we don't remember. Daniel looked again at the small hole behind the mirror. The hallway was gone. Just darkness now. But he felt it, something on the other side still watching. Part 17, The Object in the Wall. Later that afternoon, Daniel couldn't shake the thought of the knock, and that voice. Can you see it yet? He returned to the mirror wall. This time, he brought tools. He carved carefully into the drywall beneath the chalk lines. Removed a square panel. Behind it, blackness. He reached in. The space was narrow, barely enough for his forearm. He felt along the edges. Rough wood. Something metal. And then, paper. He pulled it out gently. A stack of pages. Stapled together. Dated, 1994. It was a teacher's report, apparently filed by hand, never scanned. The first line caught him off guard. Student Caleb M. does not appear on official rosters. However, multiple faculty members have reported seeing him in the halls. He wears no ID. Does not speak. Vanishes when approached. Then another entry. Student Fiona Harper has expressed fear of Caleb, claiming he stands in the art room at night whispering to himself. No such individual was found upon inspection. Daniel read the last page. It was written by the school principal. Short. Blunt. This student does not exist. But someone had written over it in pencil, heavy and dark. Yes, he does. The girl from Weller's school. Weller sat in the Municipal Archive building, a low, musty place filled with old school records, microfilm reels, and forgotten board meeting notes. He'd spent hours requesting access to documents from his old elementary school, Ashwood Primary, class of 1992. He didn't know what he expected to find. Maybe proof that someone had played a cruel prank, planted the Polaroid. But what he found was worse. An incident report. Half redacted. Dated April 20th, 1992. The summary line read. Missing student, Valerie Madsen. Last seen near West Stairwell. 8 years old. Declared a runaway. Case unresolved. Weller blinked at the name. Valerie Madsen. The name meant nothing to him. But the photo attached to the report turned his stomach inside out. A little girl. Dark eyes. Ponytail. Red jacket. He had seen her before. Not in life. But in the hallway behind the concrete. The same figure. Standing at the end. Back turned. Motionless. He dug further. Found her yearbook. Found his own name, 2 rows beneath hers. They'd shared the same class. And yet he had no memory of her. None. Just a faint feeling of déjà vu, and nausea. He turned the page. Something scribbled in pencil in the white border around Valerie's picture. 6 words. Almost faded. Barely there. Cal increment B sees what you forget. The delta symbol was familiar. He'd seen it in Fiona's drawings. Carved into the school stairwell wall. etched in the concrete. He copied it into his notebook. And underlined one word. Forget. Part 19. Daniel enters the passage. That night, Daniel stood again before the dark opening behind the mirror. The small hole had grown, he had cleared more of the wall, exposing a narrow passage. There was no more hallway visible. Just blackness. But the smell returned, lavender and chalk. And beneath it, something metallic. Like rust. Or blood. He stepped in. Crawled. The walls narrowed, then opened slightly into a corridor carved in old stone. Unbelievable. How had this existed under the house? He held a flashlight in his teeth. Moved forward. Symbols lined the walls. Chalk drawings. Fingerprints in dust. All of them circular. All of them repeating. He turned a corner. And stopped. A door. Metal. Bent and dented. And in the center of it, scrawled in a child's handwriting. Fiona's room. Keep out. He hesitated. Then opened it. Inside, a small chamber. Blankets. Candles. Broken toys. A cracked mirror. A stack of journals, neatly tied with string. And in the center, something that turned his blood cold. A school uniform. Neatly folded. Identical to Fiona's. And resting atop it, her bracelet. The one they'd never found. He picked it up. A faint whisper filled the room. You were supposed to come sooner. He turned. No one. Only the mirror. But in the mirror. He wasn't alone. A figure stood behind him. Not a reflection. Not his. Part 20. The tape. Weller, now back in his office, reviewed the last thing he'd taken from the archive, a cassette tape, unlabeled except for one word scratched into the plastic. Return. He found an old recorder. Hit play. Static. Then, faint audio. Children laughing. A school bell. A teacher calling names. Madsen, Valerie. Melvin, Caleb. Weller sat up. Rewound. Played it again. Madsen, Valerie. Melvin, Caleb. He froze. Melvin. Caleb Melvin. On a school tape. From 1992. But he wasn't supposed to exist. The teacher's voice continued. Fiona Harper. Please come to the front. 3 names. Together. On one roll call. He hit pause. And for a moment, just before the audio cut, a low voice muttered behind the children's noise. I see you. Even now. The tape ejected itself. Weller stared at it. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He remembers you too, Tom. He always did. Part 21. The Things Beneath. Daniel brought the stack of tied journals back upstairs. He tried to read them, but the entries weren't always in English. Sometimes symbols. Sometimes letters rearranged. One phrase kept repeating. Time is not straight down here. Another. They built over him. He never left. And in the margins, sketches of doors. Some open. Some nailed shut. One looked like the door in the chamber behind the wall. He flipped to the back. A letter. Addressed. To Dad. If you're reading this. I'm sorry. I tried to leave. I really did. But time loops, and I always end up back here. I see myself walking past, younger. I see others who forgot their names. I think Caleb built it. Or maybe it built Caleb. Don't try to open the second door. The one beneath the first. That's where it listens. If you hear it knock, don't answer. Not like I did. I'll try again. Maybe next time I'll get out. Daniel read the final line aloud. The Pine Man still walks. He wears your face sometimes. He dropped the journal. Footsteps echoed in the ceiling above. But no one else was home. The school nurse. Weller drove 2 hours north to the house where his aunt still lived, his mother's sister, retired and sharp-minded despite the passing years. She greeted him cautiously. You came for answers, not a visit, didn't you? She asked. He nodded. About Mom. Aunt Lydia pursed her lips. Motioned for him to come inside. The walls were lined with old photos. He pointed to one, a black and white staff picture. There. His mother. Wearing a nurse's uniform. Where was this taken? Ashwood Primary, Lydia said, almost dismissively. She worked there from 88 to 93. You didn't know? He shook his head. She never talked about it. No, Lydia said. And with good reason. She lowered her voice. There were incidents. What kind? Children disappearing. Whispers in the hallways. Your mother always said there were rooms that weren't on the school plans. Rooms that moved. Weller stared. She quit, Lydia added. The day after Valerie Madsen vanished. Just walked out. Never went back. But she never really left it behind. Did she mention a name? He asked. Lydia hesitated. Then whispered it like a curse. Caleb. Part 23, The Second Door. Daniel sat on the floor of the chamber, Fiona's journals scattered around him. He noticed something strange on the wall near where he'd found her bracelet. A chalk circle. But different from the others. This one had numbers spiraling inward, backward, not forward. He touched it. The stone shifted. A small slab fell away, revealing metal behind it. Another door. Smaller. Older. Heavy bolts along the edges. And across its face, carved by hand. Here end the names. Below it, a small symbol etched into the steel. Delta. The same delta as in Weller's Polaroid. The same one Fiona had drawn 100 times. He leaned closer. A whisper slid under the door like breath. He woke up again. He stepped back. The air was suddenly colder. The candles flickered, though no wind blew. Daniel's hands trembled. From behind the door came a dull, rhythmic thumping, too slow to be a knock. Too heavy to be a heartbeat. Then. A word. Spoken not in voice, but in vibration. Father. Part 24, Burned Records. Weller returned to Ashwood that night. The school was boarded up. Scheduled for demolition, but still standing. Just barely. He climbed through a broken window in the gymnasium. Flashlight in hand. Hallways stretched out before him like arteries of a long-dead beast. And then, near the nurse's office, the one his mother must have worked in, he found a file cabinet still standing upright. Burned along the edges. Most folders inside were ash. But one remained. Scorched, but intact. Label. Unenrolled/non-registered students. Inside. A single sheet. Yellowed. Cracked. Name, Caleb Melvin. DOB, unknown. Address, none on file. Entry date. Disciplinary action, refuses to speak, known to appear in restricted areas, leaves marks on walls. Removed from class. Not present on census. At the bottom. Recommendation, transfer to quiet room. He'd never heard of it. The quiet room. He flipped the page. A crude sketch of the school's floor plan. A corridor labeled Northeast Annex had a black X drawn over a door. Next to it, handwritten in red ink. Do not unlock. Do not answer. Do not acknowledge. Part 25, a voice on the phone. Daniel hadn't spoken to anyone in 2 days. He no longer left the house. He couldn't. Every time he did, he'd see Fiona's face in strangers. Hear her voice in white noise. See her handwriting in the condensation on windows. He drank too much coffee. Tried not to sleep. He stared at the second door. Dared it to open. But it didn't. Not yet. His phone rang. No caller ID. He answered. A child's voice, distorted, genderless, slow. She's not just missing. She's woven in. Like thread. You saw her bracelet, didn't you? But what you saw wasn't the first version. Daniel tried to speak, but the line filled with static. Then the voice again. If you want to see the truth, all of it, you have to go through. But if you do, you don't come back the same. Ask Weller. He's been through. Long ago. Click. Silence. Daniel stared at the screen. He didn't know how the caller knew Weller. But suddenly, he wasn't sure Weller remembered everything he claimed to have forgotten. The quiet room. Weller stood at the far end of the demolished annex. It took 2 hours and a crowbar to get through the rusted barrier. There it was. The door from the diagram. Heavy. Bent at the edges. A window painted over in black. Just like the one in Daniel's house. Above it, a single word, barely legible through decades of decay. Quiet. He turned the handle. It opened far too easily. Inside, no dust. No rot. Just silence. So complete it rang in his ears. He stepped inside. The walls were padded. Torn in places. Symbols beneath the padding, spirals, triangles, overlapping words in reverse. A single chair in the center. And carved into its back. Weller was here. His breath caught. He stepped closer. Something flared inside his skull, not pain, not sound, a flood of memory. Part 27, What He Forgot. 1992. A storm. His mother screaming in the hallway. A boy, pale, silent, standing at the end of the corridor with a name tag. Caleb. Weller, just 7 years old, walked toward him. No one else saw the boy. The walls around them pulsed like lungs. The boy whispered. You're going to help me remember my name. Then darkness. He woke hours later in the quiet room. Alone. His mother refused to speak of it. Later, he told himself it was a dream. That Caleb wasn't real. But now. He touched the chair. The carvings. They were fresh. From his own pocket notebook, years ago, the same handwriting. His. But when had he come here? The air changed. Behind him, the sound of feet on tile. He turned. Nothing. But on the floor, a single photograph. Fiona. Standing with Valerie Madsen. And between them, Caleb Melvin. All three smiling. But none of them looked alive. Part 28, Through the Door. Daniel stared at the second door in the chamber for what felt like hours. The whispers behind it had stopped. Only silence remained. Then, 3 knocks. Measured. Deliberate. He pressed his hand against the metal. It was cold. A voice, barely audible. You have the key. He looked down. In his hand, Fiona's bracelet. He hadn't even realized he was holding it. He touched it to the lock. The mechanism turned by itself. The door cracked open. Darkness inside. But not empty. He stepped through. And the world bent sideways. Part 29, the other side. He wasn't in his house anymore. Or underground. He stood in a classroom, long abandoned. But not quite. Desk still in place. Sunlight pouring through frosted windows. Children's laughter far away, but out of sync, like a warped tape. He walked past the chalkboard. Names written in perfect cursive. Fiona Harper. Valerie Madsen. Caleb Melvin. Tom Weller. Daniel Harper. He froze. His own name, but not as a parent. As a child. He backed away. Then saw her. Fiona. Standing in the far corner. Pale, older, not as he remembered. But unmistakably her. "Dad," she whispered. He ran to her, but as he did, the room elongated. Stretched. She remained far away. Her voice echoed. "It's not a place, Dad. It's a pattern. It pulls people in. Not just me. You weren't supposed to open the second door. But maybe now, we have a chance." The world twisted. He saw images, flash after flash. A tree with no leaves but hundreds of names carved into its bark. His wife, looking at Fiona's empty chair. A face. Not quite human. Wearing a paper crown. Then. Black. Part 30, The Return. Daniel awoke in the chamber. The door behind him sealed shut. But Fiona's bracelet was gone. In his hand, a new object. A school ID card. Issued 1994. Photo, Fiona. But the name read. Valerie Harper. He stared in confusion. The printer ink had bled. Under the name, faintly visible. Alias, Fiona Madsen. Part 31, Puzzle Pieces. Weller met Daniel in the forest clearing, by the remains of the old bus stop, where Valerie Madsen had last been seen 33 years ago. Daniel showed him the ID card. Weller, pale, said. "She wasn't your daughter." Daniel shook his head. "She is now." Weller nodded slowly. "Maybe that's what the place does. It rearranges people. Swaps them. Threads them in." He pulled out a Polaroid. The one he'd found months ago. He turned it over. A single sentence had appeared, hadn't been there before. He found her, but not in time. Daniel whispered. "Then who did I raise?" Weller looked him in the eyes. And said. "Maybe the girl you raised was trying to escape him all along." Part 32, Descent. The return to the chamber beneath Daniel's house was not a decision. It was a necessity. The second door remained sealed, but something had changed in the air around it. No more whispers. Just a humming, low, steady. Like a machine waiting to be fed. Weller and Daniel stood before it in silence. "You sure she's still in there?" Weller asked. Daniel didn't answer. He pressed his hand against the steel. It pulsed, like flesh. Then the door opened on its own. Inside, the classroom, again. But decayed now. Empty. Time had finally touched it. They stepped through. Part 33, The In-Between. The corridor behind the classroom stretched farther than logic allowed. On the walls, photographs nailed like warnings. Each one showed Fiona. Smiling. Hiding. Running. In every photo, someone stood behind her. Blurry. Crooked. Wearing a paper crown. Caleb. They reached a room of mirrors. But no reflection. Just flickers of different versions of themselves. Daniel saw himself as a teenager. Then a janitor. Then a teacher. Weller saw himself as a child in a padded room, whispering a name into the darkness. And in one mirror, Fiona. Face calm. Eyes bleeding ink. She whispered. He's waiting for one of you to take his place. Part 34, Caleb. They found him in the quiet room's heart. Not a boy. Not a man. A thing made of memory. Body like shadow stitched to bone. Voice that echoed before it was spoken. He sat on a throne of broken furniture and books torn in half. Around him, the missing children. Still. Watching. Not alive. Not dead. Some wore school uniforms from the 70s. Others from last year. All carried a piece of Fiona's face. Caleb smiled. You brought me back my name, he said. Weller stepped forward. You were never real. Oh, but I was, Caleb purred. And you let me in, Tom. You opened the door first. He turned to Daniel. And you raised the girl I remade. Daniel held up the school ID. You rewrote her. I gave her purpose, Caleb said. But she broke away. She remembered. She remembered me, Daniel said. Caleb's face cracked. For the first time, something like fear. Then take her, he hissed. But leave someone else behind. Part 35, The Bargain. The quiet room began to collapse. Mirrors shattered. The children flickered, screams without mouths. Caleb rose. Someone always stays. Fiona emerged from the far wall, walking like gravity no longer applied. She looked at Daniel. I remember the day I vanished, she said softly. I wasn't running from home. I was running toward it. He reached for her. But something pulled her back, chains of names, spirals of old rules. Caleb opened his arms. Trade, he whispered. Daniel turned to Weller. Eyes met. Weller nodded. I opened the first door. He stepped into the center. The room obeyed. Chains snapped. Fiona fell into Daniel's arms. Caleb screamed. So did the room. And then, silence. Part 36, Home. It rained that night. Daniel sat on the porch with Fiona. Older now. Tired. But alive. She sipped tea. Do you think it's over? She asked. No, he said. But the house is quiet now. She nodded. Then handed him something. A photo. Weller. Standing in a hallway made of mirrors. Alone. Smiling. Where did you get this? He asked. She looked at him. I didn't, she said. It was on my bed when I woke up. Part 37, Epilogue. The house was torn down the following year. Nothing grew on the lot. No one bought it. People said sometimes, at night, they heard the sound of a school bell. No school for miles. Daniel moved. Fiona went to college. They didn't talk much about the past. But sometimes, when Fiona looked in a mirror, her reflection didn't match her movement. Sometimes, Daniel would dream of desks and chalkboards, and hear children calling his name in voices that weren't quite right. And once, just once, he received a letter with no return address. Inside. A note in red ink. Just one sentence. Thank you for remembering me. Signed. C.